Welcome to another live edition of Blacklisted Radio. My name is Doug Owen, and I am your host as usual. Every Sunday night we do this show from 9 p.m. Central Standard Time to 10 p.m. It's a 1-hour review, look back at the week, and, well, what may be in store for the next week. We do a little future casting here, too. It's a commentary, social commentary on life, the world, the news that we post at blacklistednews.com. I'm the senior editor, and you can go to my website, blacklistedradio.com. That's the mothership for the show. We have an interactive chat room. The ambassadors are there and will welcome you. You can also listen to the stream in a lot of different ways in our post-produced, commercial-free podcast that you can find at blacklistedраdio.com. So lots there. If you'd like to join the conversation, you can do that by telephone. You can talk to Ken there behind the glass. 800-313-9443, or you can text me at 512-222-3067. So where are you at, all of you Trump supporters, with the latest revelations? Of course, I'm talking about the 50 to 60 Raytheon missiles that were shot into Syria as a response to this alleged chemical attack that happened this week. There's a lot to unpack here, although I'll be up front. I don't have a lot more to add to the, very legitimate questions about the veracity, the legitimacy of the Bashar al-Assad regime conducting these chemical attacks in northern Syria. So there's a lot to talk about, and there's a lot of people that are wondering whether or not next week we will be faced with World War III. It's kind of passé, somewhat milquetoast to throw the term World War III out there. But I'm really curious to see where some of the very ardent Trump supporters actually are on this retaliatory strike. Now, of course, just 2 weeks ago, Rex Tillerson, head of the State Department, said that Bashar al-Assad can stay, that he would be part of the peace process and would be assisting them alongside the Russians and others in fighting ISIS. So apparently Bashar al-Assad decided that, while things are good and we do have, at least an arm up in this conversation, that he's going to gas his people. So the narrative there, of course, just doesn't make a lot of sense. Republican Congressman Massey brought this question to CNN when they were asking him. And they're like, well, I'd like to see a little bit more proof. Of course, there is really no investigation, and the Trump administration struck while the iron was hot, while people were crying over the gassed babies. And according to him, he had crossed Bashar al-Assad several red lines. So that doesn't make a lot of sense. Ron Paul said that this looks like a false flag attack. You even have Scott Adams, the creator and artist and writer behind Dilbert, that has come out and said this looks like a false flag. But the whole narrative itself has so many problems. Of course, the initial reports that this is sarin gas that was used completely blew up. If you have any familiarity with sarin gas, or you have Google, you can find out that if you touch sarin gas, you will die. It is immediate death upon contact. If it's launched in dense populations, we're expecting, not hundreds, but thousands, if not tens of thousands of people to be affected. And so you have the white helmets and first responders there washing these people off. And, maybe not sarin, probably chlorine gas or some mixture thereof, some nerve agent. Who knows what was sprayed? I really do think that somebody down there was sprayed with something, but you have to question who would do it and who would have the motive to gas these people. I mean, Bashar al-Assad has a lot of ways of killing people, barrel bombs. I mean, I could go through the litany. And of course, if there was a need to kill people, on the ground, the Russians could have assisted in that. The likelihood that they would want to do that is, it's almost zero. So regardless of whether or not you think this is a false flag, I absolutely do, and I'm not alone in saying that. If you look at Occam's razor, what's the most likely scenario? What's the most, who benefits the most, and what's the easiest way to come to a conclusion? And it would be that somebody, either a rogue operator under the instruction of some outside actor, Israel, the United States, Turkey, to name a few, actually launched this attack with chemical weapons that they had been given, because according to John Kerry and the international community, apparently there were no weapons of mass destruction. There were no chemical weapons still inside of Syria. Now, that's not to say they couldn't, miss a cache here or there. So I don't know if there's, incontrovertible evidence that there was no, people inside of the Assad regime that would have had chemical weapons. So many chemical weapons, hard to keep track of them. But I don't mean to laugh. It's just that we've heard this over and over again. Chemical weapons. The Bolivian. Let's see here. I had him. The Bolivian president, said in front of the UNSC, the United Nations Security Council, that the U.S. once had proof of weapons of mass destruction. 1 million people died. And look at where we're at today. And of course, the question is, who launched this investigation? The U.S. So we are the judge, jury, and executioner in this. Now, beyond all of that, there is a lot of meta-analysis to take away from this. You have Donald Trump, who is eating with Chinese premier. He concludes his dinner, and then immediately we see the launch of VLS Tomahawk missiles. Immediately we saw that defense contractors from Raytheon across the board, their stock prices alongside gold and a few other commodities just shot to the roof, which is not unexpected, but it shows you that there's a lot of money to be made off of war. You have Donald Trump, who is now being applauded by the mainstream media and the neocons, the Nancy Pelosi's, the John McCain's, the Hillary Clintons, who herself had just a few hours beforehand asked that Donald Trump would attack Bashar al-Assad. So now you even have people saying things that just seem macabre and disturbing, and that this is somehow the defining legacy, that now Donald Trump is presidential. So let's talk about the launch. Let's talk about the attack. I spent a few years on a cruiser, and we had vertical launched Tomahawk missiles, and I was present when they shot many of those into Kosovo back in, 1997? So seeing these things firsthand, the Russian reports immediately that many of these were off target. We've seen some of the aftermath. If you haven't seen the videos and want to, if you want to see the legacy of chemical weapons, depleted uranium things, armaments that the United States military has used on civilian populations, there's just a huge bevy of videos and information that you can find out there if you want to appall yourself. If you look at the cancer rates and the massive use of depleted uranium munitions in Iraq and the aftermath, the caustic half-life of places like Fallujah. This is pretty much a very weak rebuttal. Okay, you blow up some airstrips. The Syrians say killed 5 people. Not a big deal, other than it's a war crime. Rand Paul, who is somebody who's become a media darling for the anti-war movement, says that let's look at Trump and what he did. He needs to go to Congress before launching military attacks. He needs congressional authority, according to the Constitution. Not that anybody else has needed that. Barack Obama did not need that. George W. Bush did not need that. And in the post 9/11 world, the executive branch has the privilege and duty to defend the United States of America, for whatever that means. I mean, of course, you could say, well, there's no imminent threat to the United States of America. So what are you talking about, Donald Trump? Now, this launch is very symbolic because it's not effective. Okay, so and it's not anything new. We've already had the Israelis and the Turkish government attacking and shelling and using missiles inside of Syria. So we're not the first nation that has crossed that boundary. We already have 1,000+ troops in northern Syria. And that doesn't even count the uncounted private contractors of the military-industrial complex that are on the ground and other foreign players, including the Russians and their private mercenary contractors. So you have a huge amount of people here, some of which are aligned with fighting Bashar al-Assad, i.e. ISIS, and that becomes, that is the Pandora's box. We have ISIS alongside the U.S. launching attacks against the Syrian government. Did they get the inside track? The question, of course, becomes whether or not the Russians knew. There's plenty of intelligence. The Independent and the London Independent and the New York Times said that the U.S. let Russia know that this attack was going to happen. If the Russians knew that the attack was going to happen, what's to say that they didn't let the Syrians know about this? I mean, the chatter leading up, Thursday night to the launch. I mean, if I know about it here in Round Rock, Texas, that this is happening, you can bet your sweet bippy that Bashar al-Assad knew this. So this is a great way to, one, show the Chinese premier. I mean, these attacks were launched right after meeting with who? China. Who do we have to scare? China. I'm not going to play the clips, but you could put a montage of Trump talking about China into this show, and it would be very entertaining. Plenty of times that he's blamed a lot of the economic issues of the United States on China. So, was this a message to the premier? One of the messages I think that he's trying to convey, obviously, is that, hey, I'm not homeboys with the Russians. Me and Putin are not friends, and this is a sign that we are loyal to the United States and not to some foreign power, that we are independent and that we will strike if we feel like striking. I mean, you don't need this. I mean, I guess it's good to have some pretext to have a chemical weapons attack. And it really, at this point, doesn't matter whether or not it was a false flag because the damage has been done, the message has been put out there, and it happened before anybody could blink, which I think it's smart from a strategic standpoint. One of the problems I would say that Barack Obama had was that he mulled things too much. He was too much of a thinker and not a overreactor. So reactionary, pointless, and reckless, absolutely. That's what this is. Of course, a lot of the Donald Trump base is wondering now what to think, because in 2013, we've printed all of the, many tweets about not attacking Syria, that Donald Trump was against this, and he talked as if he was the anti-war candidate. Many of you out there listening, voting for Donald Trump, did that because he was an alternative to Hillary Clinton. So there's definitely a huge a faction of, I think, his fan base that is trying to make sense of this. And of course, if you were an anti-war advocate, you see that there really was no choice. Whether or not you have Hillary Clinton, who she's all in, she wanted it. John Kerry, he's crying for it. Joe Biden said he thinks that this makes Donald Trump look presidential. So there was no hopeful, other than maybe the the estranged and ever more popular Bernie Sanders that may have stumbled. But I don't know. It's hard to say whether or not Bernie would have bombed. Would Bernie bomb? I don't know. But of the two pre-selected choices that you had at the ballot box in 2016, Donald Trump was supposedly let's not blow up Syria. It's a bad idea. Of course, if you get rid of Bashar al-Assad, what comes in his place? I mean, you have a secular government or non-secular government in this Ba'athist party that Saddam Hussein was part of. The correlation between the CIA, the Ba'aths, and the father and now son Bashar al-Assad in this region. I mean, they are non-secular. They have protected Christians, and they have been a ally in the quote unquote war on terror. Of course, the U.S. used to torture people at the black sites in Syria. So, before you get on the, Bashar al-Assad bandwagon, it's not that I think he's a good guy. I just don't think that he did this, and that's kind of where I lay out on that. So, of course, what will this bring? Now, the Russians and, of course, Bashar al-Assad have said that they will retaliate. The measured response shows that I think that Bashar al-Assad understands the seriousness of this. And at the same time, I think that he understands that this is a way, a completely political military move that will benefit Donald Trump in a lot of ways. Obviously, with reuniting the neocons, the warmongers, and the Democrats and established Republicans to the table. They love this, okay? They are still of that neoliberal mindset that to make America great again, we have to blow up the rest of the world, isolate China and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and force feed Africa and the rest of Europe U.S. dollars and our oil and gas. I mean, that's kind of the game in a nutshell as to what makes America great in their minds. And so now Donald Trump. Now, I've heard some analysis on, his speech talking about the babies and the red lines. And, the question becomes, did Donald Trump fall victim to fake news, fake intelligence? Because that's what we have here. We have a president that is either, in on the game, understands what's happening, understands the narrative that he's creating by using this false flag, or you have a dope, somebody that saw this video and thought, well, yep, we got to do something about it, even though it makes absolutely no sense. Now, I don't think that Donald Trump's a dope. I don't think that he's a stupid person. I don't know if he's the most brilliant. When you listen to him speak, you have to wonder if he's doing it. The question becomes, is he doing it for the people that are voting for him, for his constituents, for the voting morons out there, for the toothless racists, the 10 of you that voted for him that are toothless and racist? I know that people, you're feeding into all of that bull crap. I know I'm joking about it because, of course, if you didn't want to vote for Hillary, that means that you're a racist. The same people that voted for Barack Obama, who voted for Donald Trump, all of a sudden became racist and xenophobic and misogynistic, and they hate women and they don't want to pay him the same, and all of the other cockamamie reasons to not like Donald Trump. So that is where we are with the chemical weapons attack. The question is, what comes tomorrow? What will be the response, if any? And, well, where will we be tomorrow? What's the new fake news that will be leading the conversation? We'll talk about it more on the other side. It's Blacklisted Radio. Welcome back. It's Blacklisted Radio. Good to be with you here on this Sunday evening. You can join me telephonically, 800-313-9443. You can go to the website, blacklistedradio.com. We have an interactive chat room. Good to see some of the friends in there. Murr Bailey, of course, Craig Simpson, and others, including myself. So go there, check it out. Assad apparently gasses his people just days after he's told he can stay in power. I mean, it's just so convenient. I mean, I don't know how you can how you can really come to the conclusion that Bashar al-Assad gassed his people so quickly, but it doesn't matter. That's the brilliance of geopolitics. Strike while the iron's hot, before anybody can ask questions. Create a conclusion by stamping it with a Raytheon missile. You did it. There's no doubt. Boom. We're going to blow up your airfields. And what are you going to do about it? Nothing. So, I mean, that is really what I took away from this, that we have an assertive, aggressive response. And, of course, this does a lot of damage control for the Trump administration that's having some problems, I guess. I mean, the media has been a constant counter to any initiative. Meanwhile, while all of this was going on, somehow we have a new justice. We have Gorsuch, who has become the new Supreme Court justice, slid right on in. People are busy watching things, and I find it just, you turn on the television and they're just repeating this narrative that no one believes. It's one of the reasons that I think the mainstream media is so offended by the alternative fake media, if you will, the Sputniks and the Russian counterpart RT that put out good information. I mean, you're not going to hear a lot of things that are being discussed at the United Nations Security Council for obvious reasons in U.S. mainstream media, whether they don't find it to be interesting or that they think it's anti-American. So you just don't get that full spectrum perspective of what's happening in the world. At the same time, to worry about RT really, shows where the mainstream media is at. And of course, politicians, where something that, I wouldn't even say 1% of the U.S. population. I mean, we're not talking about millions of people. We're talking about tens of thousands, possibly, that even watch RT or subscribe to, an anti-U.S., ideology, political ideology, which, not anti-U.S., I'm just not real thrilled with the people in charge and what they've done with the direction of this country. And I think that it's just not reasonable or advantageous to the people of not just this country, but other countries around the world. I mean, if there was one thing to glean from all of this, if this really did make America strong, if this really did benefit us financially, then you can make the claim that, well, I don't know, the 200 plus civilians in Mosul that were accidentally killed by the U.S. just last week are less human being than the people in Syria. Turn on the television and they have this father talking about how his children were gassed. And yeah, like I said, I don't doubt that these people were sprayed with chemical weapons. Maybe they were. It definitely wasn't sarin. A lot of questions. And then, of course, the convenient people that, speak English that are ready to tell their stories, I always find somewhat suspect. But, I mean, it's horrific. But what about the people that died from a Raytheon missile in Mosul that were shot by the U.S.? I mean, is that any less horrific when you're caught, when you burn to a crisp? Is that any more humane? I mean, somehow we've lost that correlation between all of the targeted killings that the U.S. does that has collateral damage because, it's a motive or an intention for good that excuses it. And that's what I mean is that people think, well, we're doing it for a good reason, Doug. We're trying to kill the bad guys. And if we have to kill some women and children, well, F it. Every once in a while, S happens. Stuff happens. The latest look at the accuracy of these VLS missiles is not very good, according to the Russians, according to the Syrians, according to their drone footage that I looked at. I mean, not a lot of stuff. And so you can say, well, they're just kind of, they're $5 million a piece, but they're not that accurate, only a few hundred yards. That could be the difference between a daycare, a hospital, or a military bunker. Often is, isn't it? Quick break, another half to go. Halfway done here on Blacklisted Radio. Stay tuned. More to come. All right, welcome back. Text me 512-222-3067 on the text line. Doug, it does matter if it's a false flag. It matters even more than you know. It's a great point. When it comes to dissecting and proving things are not as they seem, is very important. I mean, there's obviously a lot of oddities and irregularities in the story. I can't, be on the ground in Syria and conduct my own chemical weapons test to see if this was, some kind of noxious gas. And the people that will be on the ground, if the U.S. and or the United Nations or some arm of that group comes to some conclusion, some medical scientific conclusion, I'll still be somewhat skeptical of that as well. But I know what the takeaway is and what the political response will be. And that's the most important thing. Because, knowing that something is bullcrap, knowing that this story is complete BS, that in and of itself doesn't change anything. One of the things it does do is it reaffirms that you're not crazy, okay? You're not stupid. And I think for a lot of you listening, including myself, that's one of the big problems I have with the media. When I watched it, when I believed Scott Pelley, when I listened to people like David Muir give me the nightly news and tell me what it is that I need to know, I always felt like, man, this doesn't make any sense. Why would they do that? I always had all of these questions in my mind. Whereas, when you ask them, people would make you feel stupid, crazy, call you a conspiracy theorist, call you a crank or a kook, some disparaging term to make you, to minimize your question, to minimize the value of these opinions you put forward. And it's a real convenient way to shut people up. So, one of the things that I hope that this show and other shows like it do for listeners, and I don't just do this show. I consume tons of podcasts, tons of media content. So I'm a producer and a buyer, but it gets to really to make more of I think more sense of the world around us in a much more non-emotional, responsive way. When you're responding emotionally to things, and that's just like this scenario, emotionally you feel horrible for the people, emotionally it feels good to do something. Somebody needs to do something. Well, yeah, I mean, blowing up a few airfields, does that feel good? Is it nice? I mean, we got to see all the missile porn. Oh, Brian Williams, the confirmed fake news guy, Mr. I was caught under fire, conveniently, just telling stories that were completely fabricated from his own mind and bringing that as truth to people. He said that, oh, look at these beautiful. There's this video of him. Oh, they're so wonderful. So, I mean, there's a lot of people out there that they get off on that. I remember when we launched the first Gulf War, they were showing us footage and talking about it in 7th grade. And they, this is, sorry kids, it's when you roll the big tube TV in on a cart and you plugged it in, and we watched what was happening. I thought it was amazingly exciting. The missiles, what would happen? Ooh, are they going to blow the city up? Are they going to blow Baghdad to pieces? So as a young child, I was fascinated by this, and a lot of people are. I mean, there's definitely a good share of people that they really relish this, and you see how excited. I mean, that should show you the true nature of somebody. If you're excited about blowing up countries, if you're smiling ear to ear, just with this evil grin on your face. I mean, you're an evil person, Nancy Pelosi. Oh, she looked like she was getting off. I mean, John McCain. The usual suspects, his Lindsey Graham seems like he's gay to me, and he is he just sounds like he's gay, and I picture him and John McCain. I just really wonder what's really going on there between the two. They're just bosom buddies, two of a feather, flocking together. So there's the crew of neocons that are applauding and giving all of this love to Donald Trump for attacking without any kind of war authorization. I mean, this is that they see him as somebody that now can be manipulated and controlled. They can push a narrative. The deep state can push a fake narrative, push a fake chemical weapons attack, and get a response that they want. And let's not excuse Trump. He wants it too. It's great. I mean, we're not talking about Susan Rice this week, who was the unmasker. She had some contradictory statements between her appearances on PBS and doing the roundtable to try to exonerate herself from spying on Trump and or his team during the 2016 election. She said this is incidental. All these terms that sound nice. Oh, well, so benevolent. So, oops, we didn't do it. I mean, this is the kind of person I am. Every time I listen to Susan Rice, I'm not listening to her. I'm looking at her eyes because she wears blue mask, like a turquoise blue eyeliner under her eyes, and it's her style, it's her look everywhere you go. And I have to say, it has a weird effect. It makes her seem like she's kind of glowing, and when I'm looking at her eyes. And I realize that I'm not listening to any of the stuff that's coming out of her mouth because, let's be honest, I mean, do you buy it? Do you believe it? If you supported Trump or you think that Barack Obama and his gaggle of, Obamanites are, not somewhat criminal and are to be trustworthy, non-lying people. I mean, and that's not to disparage anybody over another. It's just I don't trust most politicians. I don't trust Sean Spicer. Why? It's not because he's Donald Trump's front man. It's not because he's the mouthpiece of the White House. It's because every other person that's been the person of the White House is, trying to come up with justification for all of the bad things that presidents do. Okay, so they just can't be trusted. And they're not going to tell you the truth. And they're going to use weasel words and legal newspeak to get around any kind of questions. They are professionals at not answering questions. They just shift and turn the corner quickly with little terms like, well, the real question should be, and then just go off on their own little tangent. Well, so what do you think? Is it bad to kill 1 million Iraqi children? Well, the question should be, do we want to submit to ISIS and let them behead the children? I mean, it's real easy to do. Politicking 101. Don't answer questions. Don't tell the truth. And that any kind of global story, especially with the attack in Syria. I mean, it wasn't a big deal when Israel struck Assad and violated international law. Nobody cared. It wasn't even a story. It was barely a story in Israel. It's probably barely a story in Syria. When the Turks attacked the Syrians, not even a story. Not even that interesting here in the U.S. Probably not that interesting in Turkey. We do it. It is meaningful. It's impactful. There's tons of analysis on what it means and where we go. I think, quite honestly, everybody knew what was going to happen, and no one was shocked, and it felt good. We had a moment. We're strong again. We showed them. We did something. Makes us feel like, that we're leaders. You always hear that. We need to be leaders in the world. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean committing war crimes? Does that mean creating a fake patriot or patriarch of people that represent us? What does that really mean? Anyway, the change is obvious. U.S. ambassador to UN says, quote, regime change in Syria is now a top priority for Trump. Maybe. I don't know if I believe you, Nikki Haley. The U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley. She's also one of the people that's concerned who and what sexual preferences go in which bathrooms. It's cost a lot of money to North Carolina, where she was the governor, I think, or at least the senator, before she took this position. So Nikki Haley, who has done a remarkable job of continuing the diplomatic tone set by her predecessor, Samantha Power, said in an interview on CNN's State of the Union, which will air in full on Sunday, you could have seen that today if you really care, that the regime change in Syria is one of the Trump administration's top priorities in Syria, or that it is. Her statement was a complete U-turn from what she said just over a week ago when she told a group of reporters that the U.S. was no longer focused on getting Assad out. Wow, how quickly that changes. So, I mean, a thinking guy or gal would have to say, well, if the U.S. doesn't want to go after Syria, or doesn't want to go after Bashar al-Assad, it doesn't want to create a no-fly zone, which they're using, and I've mentioned it before, this really nice, friendly word, which is a humanitarian corridor, you know, where a peace corridor. You're like, oh, that's nice. It's nothing but rainbows and unicorns in there, my friends. All you can drink water and all you can eat falafels. It's going to be great. It's going to be wonderful. It's going to be bigly wonderful. That's a no-fly zone. So, that might be the next step, although I don't know if we're going to go there yet, if we really want to commit, because this is a lot of grandstanding. And the only difference between last week and this week is that it's, crises and a created crisis, and now the Trump administration has to respond. They have to respond. So this is a test, no doubt, by the quote-unquote deep swamp for Donald Trump. After hearing Donald Trump was cooling on Syria, cooling on going after Bashar al-Assad and focusing on ISIS, which apparently it should be the focus. I mean, you got to wonder about a group of ne'er-do-wells that have no interest in going after Israelis. I mean, I just can't imagine Muslims that would rather go after Bashar al-Assad when right down the road they have the Israelis that are, not being very nice to the Palestinians, their brothers, that are receiving support. I mean, you have some, obvious differences of political and, religious ideology. You have factions, but how can you choose Bashar al-Assad over Israel? Makes no sense to me. And if you're a thinking man or woman, that should be a big question. I mean, that's one that deserves an answer. Why are they so hell-bent on Bashar al-Assad? At the same time, it seems that their motives also coincide with U.S. motives. Their motives also coincide with Israeli motives. And so if you're all fighting for the same thing, are you really enemies on the battlefield? Are you real? If they are doing something that you yourself would have to do, why not let them do the work for you? So at some point, why don't you support the bad guys? Because they're doing something you want. You see, I mean, it's pretty obvious. It should be to anybody, and I imagine that that's why we have this huge schism. I'll tell you what, there has been a huge shift. Just a few years ago, if this would have happened, you wouldn't have had a lot of prominent people come out immediately on Twitter, putting their reputations on the line. People in Hollywood, people like Scott Adams, saying immediately, hey, this smells like dead fish. It is fishy as F. We're not buying it. Ron Paul, I mean, you'd have to bend his ear, you'd have to pinch him and twist his leg to get him to say that 9/11 may be an inside job. I mean, it took a lot of time and effort to get that out of him. Now you have Ron Paul out of the gate, a lot of prominent people, even people like Michael Savage, who become somehow the sweetheart darlings of like Alex Jones. Alex Jones, I remember, used to bash Michael Savage and all of for many reasons, but one of which was his gay books in the 1960s, where And I mean, if you wonder why he's where why he is where he is at. I mean, obviously there are some questions about him. But he's all on board. They love Michael Savage. Michael Savage. I mean, that's pretty shocking, because there was a close-knit group of people that just would not talk about that, including Matt Drudge. They would just not entertain the U.S.'s long history of not only in intervening in elections, which makes all of this, did Russia interfere? I mean, it's absolutely a moot point. I would be surprised they didn't interfere as much as they could. The U.S. and many other Western and other nations, I mean, don't think the Chinese aren't worried about who the Filipinos are, putting in power, and what's happening in Vietnam and Malaysia. I mean, they are, and I'm sure they play a pivotal role in, statecraft. That's statecraft in itself. I mean, that's what governments do. So, I mean, it makes it just it's so trivial and pointless to, worry about whether or not the Russians, I mean, are they effective? I don't think so. I don't think that there was enough fake news about Hillary Clinton to lose her the presidency. And of course, I mean, most of you know that this is just, a way to try to stop the bleeding of the Democrat Party. It's the Russians, it's ISIS, it's Bashar al-Assad, it's a lot of people. It's the Syrian hackers, it's Guccifer 2.0. It's just about anybody else but them. It's kind of where I'm at with Donald Trump, listening to him talk about Barack Obama. It's Obama. I'm tired of it, Trump. Okay, I don't want to hear about Obama. Just like when, I don't know, for 5 years, we had Barack Obama use George W. Bush as a punching bag for blaming him for all of the problems. Oh, you see what happened in Iraq? I'd love to start the peace process, but these guys before me really did a bad number on Iraq, and we're just trying to stop the hemorrhaging. It's convenient, and it insults your intelligence. I don't care about. Okay, so I'm just putting that out there. Donald Trump. I don't want to hear about what Obama did or what he didn't do as to where you're at, because Obama didn't bomb them. Now I have to. That is inexcusable. You make decisions. It's your 4 years. It's all you, my friend. Stop deflecting and blaming people for, what you have to do right now to become presidential in the eyes of the deep state. Guys, quick break. Final segment on the other side. We'll wrap it up. Your calls are welcome. 800-313-9443. It's Blacklisted Radio. All right, welcome back. It's the final segment. I have been corrected. Nikki Haley is from South Carolina. She was the one that was worried about the stars and bars, and she took a lot of heat for trying to keep the South Carolina flag with the ever iconic rebel flag, or a version of the rebel flag. And she took a lot of heat for that. And, I think it's one of these things that, is probably the scariest thing that could happen, and that is that, people are so involved in trying to fix the world, fix the problems, try to erase history to make us feel better, that we completely lose sight of that history. I mean, were there racist things? Yeah, there's a lot of really horrible things. People came to this continent and they killed. But guess what? People on this continent, Native Americans, Siberians that had made their way down here, they were killing each other too. People have only over the last 100 years or so have really decided collectively that killing is somewhat bad. I mean, it's rare to get marauded. Well, I wouldn't say rare, but it's not as likely that if you go on a trip that you will die if you go to cross country. 100 years ago, there's a good chance if you went across country in a covered wagon or, by horse, by foot, that you would die. So, that's what I worry about often, is that, we're losing touch of what history will be, and that, things like this attack amongst many other events, will be forever forgotten. That the newspeak, the new reality, the fake news somehow becomes the history books. You say you hear the saying that you should learn from history. If you don't, you will be destined to repeat it, doomed to repeat it. And the problem is that history is repeating. It's always a cycle. And that's the big thing that we're seeing play out in Syria. It's a cycle. Every 3 or 4 months, when everything's calm and it looks like there's a chance for peace, and it's not just Syria, lots of places, Iraq, something happens. Something screws it all up. There's an incident. And then there has to be a new solution. If you didn't know that, let's just take the chemical weapons out of the equation. Let's say Bashar al-Assad went out there and personally murdered 200 people. They had videotape of this. That might not even be that compelling. Now, somehow, when you use chemical weapons, it's so much more horrific. And of course, it's a legal reason that we have this chemical attack. I mean, because that's the one red line. It's the one thing that is the no. It's an international war crime, and that war crime will allow more war crimes. So it's very convenient, self-fulfilling prophecy that's playing out in the media. So I don't know if I've lent a lot of extra information to the conversation, but the real point is that history is moving so quickly. Events are unfolding so quickly. People are constantly chasing the truth and have very little time to do that. Guys, I got some support this week. I will bring that up on the next show. Sarah, I love you. Thanks. Always. There's a few of you out there, including Rick and Jason, who came to the show. But next week we'll give proper attribution for those who support the show. And of course, you out there, you produce it. It is created and executed and put out there exclusively by and for the people that listen to this radio show. So if you'd like to support us, you can do that at blacklistedраdio.com. My name's Doug Owen. I will be back next week for another live edition of Blacklisted News Radio. I hope you will as well.